I just noticed something. Neither of the number 7 slots for the playoffs for the NFL in the wild card control their own destiny getting in. So what do I mean by control your own destiny? Control your own destiny means that if you win, you are in. It means that ultimately it's really come down to you. Now, there are some cases in which, yes, teams have controlled their own destiny and they managed to make something out of it. For example, in Week 18, there's a Titans vs. Jaguars game. Both of them controlled their own destiny. The winner would clinch the AFC South title, and it just came down to that. If the Titans lost, which they did, they were out. If the Jaguars lost, they weren't out per se, but they would no longer control their own destiny. They would have to rely on the Patriots, Steelers, and Dolphins, and I think the order is actually Patriots, Dolphins, Steelers. Yeah, Patriots, Dolphins, Steelers. All 3 teams would have to lose their games. So, obviously, for the Jaguars, they would be effectively out because relying on 3 teams to lose, the chances of that happening were quite small. Probably about 8-9% chance of getting in if they lost to the Titans. But they won and were guaranteed that number 4 slot. So that's not, the only instance of controlling your own destiny. What control your own destiny just really means is that, it's come down to the Eagles. They controlled their own destiny for the bye titles they ultimately got. If they won against the Giants, which they did, they would have gotten their title in Week 18. But the 49ers really didn't control their own destiny for the title. If the Eagles had lost, then obviously they wouldn't control their own destiny. Then the 49ers would control their own destiny in their game against the Cardinals. And the Cowboys would have then also had a chance to have clinched the NFC East title had they won against the Commanders. That's why the sports commentators are really saying that, 1, 2, and 5 are still all in play. The Eagles, all they need to do was win to clinch the number 1 seed. But if they lost, they risked falling down to the number 5 seed. The Cowboys, if they won, could have been in the number 2 seed or even clinched the bye with the 49ers lost. The 49ers were going to be either 1 or 2 because they had already clinched their division. But, it was a really stressful game for Eagles fans, but they beat the Giants. The Giants were, by the way, locked in at the number 6 seed, so all they could do was just try to prevent them from winning. So that's just kind of what controlling your own destiny means. Also with the AFC bye, the Bills no longer control their own destiny after the very unfortunate Damar Hamlin situation. And I feel like what's really messed up about it was that the Bengals benefited and it harmed the Bills. By effect, this also meant that it harmed the Chiefs. Helped the Chiefs and harmed the Ravens. Because the Ravens no longer control their own destiny for the NFC, for the AFC North title, but they didn't get it anyway. Now, with all that being said, which 2 teams controlled their own destiny for the number 7 seeds? Well, they were the New England Patriots and the Green Bay Packers. Both of those teams had the situation of, if you win, you're in. Now, if the Packers lost, they wouldn't have gotten in at all, and they didn't win. Now, for the Patriots, if they lost, they would have needed the Jaguars to have won, and then it would have come down to both the Dolphins and Steelers losing in order for them to have made it in. It was, again, very intense because in the NFC, you had the Seahawks, Lions, and Packers, who were 8-8. Several factors limited to just those 3 teams. We had to talk about, the Commanders-Giants game that wound up in a tie. Had the Commanders won and the Giants, they would have lost, then they also would have been at 8-8. And we could have had this 5-way situation. But because they tied, the Commanders were only at 7-8, and even with a win, they would still have no chance because of the fact that both the Lions and Packers won Week 17. And as far as the the Giants went, they clinched in Week 17 with the win over the Colts because they were at 9-6. So, worst case scenario, they fall down to 9-7. But again, that tie was really instrumental. And if it was like baseball where you can't tie and just keep on going into extra overtimes, which, by the way, does happen in the NFL, but only in playoff games, like the Mile High Miracle. That's a good example of a double overtime. But again, without those, you really just don't see that happen. So anyway, going back to this. So the Seahawks, Lions, Packers went 8-8. The Packers won over the Seahawks. The Seahawks beat the Lions. And the Lions beat them in a previous game over the Packers, but the Packers had a better conference record. So, what should I just from all of this? Seahawks had the advantage over the Lions. Lions had advantage over the Packers. Packers had advantage over the Seahawks. So, now in order for the Lions to have gotten in, they would have needed the Rams to have beat the Seahawks. And that game went to overtime, but ultimately the Seahawks did win 19-16 in that game. Had the Rams won, the Seahawks would have been eliminated, put down to an 8-9 record, and then the Lions and Packers both would have controlled their own destiny in this game. But the Seahawks winning actually provided a bit of an advantage to the Packers, because now they were hoping that the Lions would be discouraged. And normally that thinking is valid. Teams tend to lose hope. But the Detroit Lions hate the Green Bay Packers. And obviously they don't want to just give it to them because, it was like, well, if we can't make the playoffs, they can't make the playoffs. So they fought against the Packers hard, and even though the Packers were up, the Lions beat them 20-16. So the Lions were at 9-8, but because the Seahawks were 9-8 and beat them 48-45 in a Week 7 game, yeah, that's just why. Yeah, by the way, just don't leave your water bottles on the ground, or else I will feed the plants with them. Alright. So, oh yes, and all the snow's gone. I hope you noticed that. The beautiful snow lasted like 2 days. Anyway, as far as the situation. So yes, and the reason why I don't want to say that the Seahawks ever controlled their own destiny was because they were all relying on the Lions winning in the first place. So, but the Seahawks made it in anyway. They made it to the number 7 seed. In the playoffs, really, you always control your own destiny, because winner moves on and loser doesn't. So in the playoffs, you always control your own destiny, but not before then. That's why we don't say things like controlling your own destiny within the playoffs. And again, controlling your own destiny just means that you, if you do what you need to do, you'll make it in, and you don't need to rely on another team doing something. Now, what about on the AFC side? Well, the Patriots did not have the easiest time getting in, because they were playing against the Buffalo Bills. The whole world was against them. Everyone was rooting for the Bills. I think it was so bad that the Patriots just decided to let the Bills get the first touchdown. So there was already a score within 14 seconds of play, which again you rarely see. But ultimately the Bills would go on to win 35-23, and while it didn't eliminate the Patriots, made it very hard for them to get it, because now they wouldn't control their own destiny. And nobody was really predicting the Patriots to win either. There was this play called lunatic lateral, something like that. That was a play at the Raiders, and the Patriots just really did something very dumb by trying to make a lateral play. The game otherwise would have been sent to overtime, but the Raiders managed to intercept it and score a touchdown. Keep in mind that the Patriots had the sun against them in the Miracle in Miami, but ultimately the Dolphins would not make the playoffs that year, and the Patriots would win the Super Bowl. So when Tom Brady was interviewed about it, he didn't consider it to be a loss, because ultimately he won the season, the Dolphins could not compete in the postseason, despite this. In this case, it wasn't a Raiders win because they got eliminated from the postseason anyway after a Week 17 loss to the 49ers that went to overtime. But it was a loss for the Patriots in the sense that now they were in this tight situation. I mean, otherwise, they would have had a 9-8 record even with this loss to the Bills, and I think that they would have gone in anyway. I'm not sure who had the advantage, Patriots or Dolphins. It might have still been the Dolphins, but it would have at least have been easier and less stressful, and they wouldn't have needed to have so much so, worried about this. They would have been in a 9-7 position, which, while it wasn't a guarantee because 9-8 doesn't always make it in, it would have been more likely. And again, I don't know who would have had advantage in that hypothetical scenario if both teams, were to land at a 9-8. Actually, no, I think the Bills would have had the advantage because they would have had the advantage over the Dolphins if they both won. So, yeah, Bills would have had it. So, and that really would have meant that at that point the Patriots, why do I keep saying Bills? The Patriots would have just gotten in anyway, and there really would not have been any competition for that number 7 seed. So I guess in that sense, it's a win for the viewers and also a win for, the Miami Dolphins. Because once the Patriots were down bad, all these games at the same time, the Dolphins began to realize they could control their own destiny. And with them thinking that they could control their own destiny, they were really able to use that against the New York Jets and beat them in Week 18. The Jets were already eliminated thanks to a Week 17 loss to the Seahawks. The Jets just really choked. And I guess, officially, the Dolphins didn't control their own destiny because one of the Patriots made a historic comeback, similar to things like Super Bowl 51. But it became more and more so that the Dolphins would control their own destiny, and they won 11-6. The Steelers were also at brief points thinking that they could control their own destiny, like when the game was tied and the Jets had the ball. But Miami forced a turnover. So even though the Steelers beat the Browns 28-14, they didn't control their own destiny because if Miami won, which they did, they would get it over the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it was very disappointing for Pittsburgh's fans, very disappointed in New England, but it was very welcome in Southern Florida with the Dolphins winning. So again, they don't always control. Even if they control their own destiny, it doesn't always mean that's going to go for them. I remember for the NFC, I was almost positive that the Green Bay Packers would get it packing and would get the job done and make their way into the championships. Into the playoffs, it's the wild card, not the championships. But I feel like in the AFC, it was so hard for me to think about which team was going to do it. Who would, be able to do it, that it really became difficult for me to get behind it, and I think I kind of chickened off a little bit on my prediction, because, again, I wasn't sure. And, honestly, you could have had very interesting scenarios had just a few games gone differently. All right, so now I do want to talk about baseball for a quick second and just throw a few comparisons in as to some things that I think the NFL and MLB did similar in the playoffs, but also some other instances of teams who really did or didn't just control their own destiny. So as far as the MLB went, we saw very similar things. The New York national team made their first playoff in 6 years. The Mets, Giants had not made the playoffs before this since 2016 in both cases. They were both as wild card teams. Philadelphia lost its championships in both the MLB and the NFL, representing, again, the national side. Wisconsin, because the Milwaukee Brewers, they were also eliminated by like just 2 games. So again, Wisconsin came really close to being represented in both cases, and they weren't on the national side, in the last slot. But ultimately, they just couldn't do the job done to make it in. Just that like generic stuff. Now, as far as controlling their own destiny went, so the Mets, even in that series in Truist Park against the Atlanta Braves, when the Braves had 2 wins in the Mets in that series, the Braves had the advantage over the Mets. They did. Braves at that point were, I think, 100-58, and the Mets were 98-60. So the Braves had a 2-game advantage over the Mets. So here's why we say that the Mets controlled their own destiny in this respect. The reason why we want to say that the Mets controlled their own destiny in this case was because if they won, the Mets would control the series. So the series was previously 9-9. So this is the 19th game, the winner-take-all game as far as who would win the Braves-Mets series. Who would win between the two. And had the Mets won, they would have improved to 99-60. Braves would have fell to 159. But the Mets also would have had the advantage. So I think that so I'm starting to get confused. Were the Mets 98-60 before this? I think yeah, they were 98-60. And I think that the Braves were 159. So it was obviously, a very tricky thing. But I think that they said that even if the Mets had won 1 game, they would have controlled their own destiny as far as getting the NL East title, because that's what they were really battling for. They were battling to control this title. But had the Mets lost this game, which they did, then the Braves would have went to 150. They would have went to. Wait, huh? Oh my God, I'm an idiot. Remember when I said that the Braves were like 158 before this game? Yeah, they were 99-59, and the Mets were 98-60. So we need to restart this. So had the Mets won this game, blah blah blah, they would have controlled this. This was a winner take all as far as the as far as who would have won more games. That blah 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 blah. So had the Mets won, then Braves would have lost. So the Mets would have improved to 99-60, and the Braves would have also been down to 99-60, because it was 99-59 for the Braves and 98-60 for the Mets. And this would have meant that with them being even and the Mets controlling their own tiebreaker, if they won, the Braves would have to have won more games than the Mets. The Braves are going down to play the Marlins, Mets are playing the Nationals. And with the Mets winning 3 games, and the Braves only winning 1, it would have been like a cakewalk for the Mets had they won. And as a matter of fact, had the Braves even lost that game against the Marlins, but once they won that 1 game, that they just got it. Because again, that would have been them controlling their own destiny at that point. They still were in control. If they had just 1 to 3 games, they would have gotten it. And, if they had lost the first game, then it wouldn't really be so much controlling their own destiny as long as the Braves. But as long as they were equal in wins, the Mets were just what would have been seen as controlling their own destiny. So up to this game, they were still being seen as having the potential to control their own destiny before this game. Once they lost, the Mets fell to 98-61, and the Braves now had the advantage with a 100-59 record. And the Mets would have to have won all 3 games while the Braves lost all 3 games. It was the only scenario. And you know, this would have been a little bit easier for the Mets had that game 163 been removed. Then, in that case, the Mets, you know, still would have had the potential to have slightly controlled their own ability. Definitely in that game 163, they would have had the ability. But with being gone, they were sent to the wild card. They really, once they lost this game, could no longer control their own destiny, and it was extremely unlikely. And once the Braves won game 161, it was over for the Mets. They won the wild card. So I actually don't want to say it was over because, again, you know, in the postseason, you could move on. We have seen wild cards even win the World Series, like in 2014 and 2019. Those are good examples. In 2022, a wild card team would even make it to the World Series. But considering the Padres were actually had the head-to-head advantage over the Mets, and again, the Padres really just had the most clear example of controlling their own destiny to make it in at the end. They had the best job of doing that. Phillies also moderately controlled their own destiny, but the Braves would have needed the Padres and Phillies to have lost quite a few games for them to have made it in, and that's why we say that they really couldn't control their own destiny. In the American League, everything was set so far in advance that, yeah, you know, and that's just what controlling your own destiny means. All controlling your own destiny just means is that you can control all by yourself. I mean, you can't control, but if you do what you need to do, you will succeed. You will make your goal. In getting into the postseason or getting into a better berth in the postseason. Yeah, that's all that means. Because I feel like once you get to points in, you know, several World Series games, you get to a point where you really rely on errors. Like, I think the 1986 World Series was a time where the Mets only won because of an error by the Red Sox, or things like that. This is an exhausting video to go through after an exhausting day that's not even done yet. There's going to be more exhaustion coming, so I am signing off now.